Hey there, I am super excited. I have a new success interview for you on my Unleash Your Greatness Within podcast. It was my privilege to interview author, career, and leadership coach, Kathy Caprino.
My passion and my mission to help you unleash your greatness within. My heart goes out to the underdogs that's on their way. If you think you can go from good to great, okay, let's motivate. GreatnessWithin.com. TJ Hoisington. GreatnessWithin.com.
You see, Kathy is not only an author and a career coach, she's also a therapist. She's a Forbes senior contributor. She's a TEDx speaker. She's a LinkedIn influencer. And she's also the host of her own podcast titled Finding Brave. And you know, Kathy, what an amazing story she shares here, but we get into 7 gaps in her new book called The Most Powerful You, 7 gaps that prevent you from becoming your best self, but also from achieving your ultimate goals that you want to achieve. We have a great conversation here that's rich and insightful, and I'm so grateful that she was willing to come on to the podcast. All right, listen, if you're watching this on my YouTube channel, hey, do me a favor, subscribe, and make sure you click that notification bell so that you're the first to be notified when I come out with a new success interview or motivational message. And if you've downloaded this off of iTunes or one of the other podcasting channels, hey, I invite you to subscribe and make sure you leave a review or at least a star rating. I would really appreciate it. All right, without any further ado, let's jump right into the interview. Kathy, welcome to the Unleash Your Greatness Within podcast.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much, TJ. Honored.
You bet. I love it. Your energy is great. Your smile is great too. And I know we got some great things to talk about. You have your new book, The Most Powerful You. So let's dive into that here in just a second. But let's start off with a little bit of your story. We do that with every guest. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
I like talking about this actually, although there were hard parts. Long story short, I had a corporate career in marketing and publishing. On the outside, it looked successful. On the inside, it was not. And when I hit 40, and I'm older than that, a lot older than that now, the bumps that I faced turned into full-blown crises, TJ. So what am I talking about? Sexual harassment, gender discrimination, not all the time, just experiences of it. Zero work-life balance, chronic illness. I had an infection of my trachea for 4 years. Every 3 months, I'd get terribly sick. Toxic colleagues, narcissistic bosses. I didn't know what that was. I bet you do now. I do now, and I'll tell you why. But honestly, worse than all of that was waking up and saying, is this the work that I'm going to be doing? This is my life? Now, I had little kids then, and that was such an important part of my life, but I always wanted to be a professional and do something contributive. And here I am at 40 thinking, oh no, what is this? But as so many people face, when you've spent that long creating a career and you don't like it, but you don't tend to know what else you're going to do. I know you hear this over and over, right? So I did nothing and bought a bigger house, more financial burdens, and then 9/11 happened. And 1 month later, I was laid off in this way that felt so brutal to me, to my ego, to my sense of safety, and that I snapped. I would say I had a breakdown moment. And this is what I talk about in the book, but a lot of people have heard this. I'm sitting in my therapist's office crying. And he said, and I will never forget it, I know this looks like the worst crisis you've ever faced in your adult life. But from where I sit, it's the first moment you can choose who you want to be in the world.
Love that.
Oh, who do you want to be? Now, often what happens is you don't know the answer. So I went, I don't know. I want to be you. And he said, what does that mean to you? And I said, I want to help people, not hurt people and be hurt. From that conversation, I became a marriage and family therapist and then a career coach. And the therapy training changed my life 100%. But I found that I was drawn to helping professional women who were going through the exact same challenges I had gone through. And I was desperate to come up with new solutions. What is happening here with women? Why are we having the same kinds of problems, even though I was working with women all over the world? Why are they the same kinds of problems? And what's underneath this? What contributes to them? And how do we overcome them? And that's where we are today.
Well, that's really great. You've got an amazing story there, and you got my attention on the narcissistic leaders. Tell me give me a little picture of that.
Before I knew what narcissism was, what I would have is, for instance, I managed a $30 million budget. I was no slouch in my last job, but I would talk to this person who had become the president, who was placed there to be the president.
Yep.
And one thing I noticed, I reported to him, but he only surrounded himself with a posse of men. There were 4 men that he brought to each job, no women. Okay, all right. But I would sit and talk to him, and TJ, I swear to you, this is how it would feel. When I was talking about these big initiatives, he would look at me as if to say, why don't you just go clean the kitchen? And I'd be like, I don't understand this. Why is he acting like this? Yeah. But it went okay until I chose like a fool to challenge him. I went to HR and the president at the time, who liked me. And I said, here's what's going on. He's kind of diminishing in public to my staff. And they said, we so hear what you're talking about, but you have to go talk to him directly. So we have that on record. I went and talked to him directly. And if you know anything about narcissism, and I've written a lot about it on my Forbes blog, and you don't challenge a narcissist directly, especially if they're extreme narcissists. And from that minute on, it went badly. So can I tell you what, as a therapist, I learned as a hallmark of narcissists?
Yes.
And I know you've talked about it.
No. This is great. This is great for the listeners to hear, because we do have leaders on the show that will be hearing this. And I think, hey, these are good reminders, because no woman, no person, no matter the creed, race, color, whatever, background, ethnic group, none of that matters. We should all be treated with respect, kindness, and so forth. We should still expect greatness, right? We should expect results, but it's how you do it. Anyway, so please, yes.
So here's what I learned are the hallmarks of a true narcissist. And I'm not talking about pop culture. I'm talking about a narcissistic personality disorder. And TJ, I want to say this. The research says that at least 10% of the population either has a narcissistic personality disorder or a borderline personality disorder. And I really believe, and so do other therapists, that number is not great enough, because the narcissists don't tend to be diagnosed. They don't go for help. But even if that's true, imagine how many people have been raised by narcissists, and that creates wounds. But here they are, narcissism. First of all, no accountability. If I said to you, TJ, you know, what you said to me there was it didn't land right, you would not accept that. It would be all of a sudden about me. Number 2, can't be challenged. And, you know, we have a lot, interestingly, narcissism can also look like charisma. So there are a lot of narcissists who are leading multinational organizations or leading political organizations. Or number 3, they somehow think they're above the rules. Rules don't apply. Number 4, there's a sense
and let me just say that. And I think I we'll get into this later in your power gap number 3, but there is a fine balance between the rules don't apply and when they do, right? Because it's the people that think out of the box and reach higher and strive for more that often, the question is, do we leave the ego in or do we leave it out, right? Right?
I love that. Nobody's made that differentiation. I love it. The one kind of example I offer about this is, have you ever been to Disney World and there's a line of 100,000 people long?
Yeah, right.
The narcissist will say, I shouldn't have to stand in this line. It's that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I'm not like these people. That's what I mean.
Elevating ourselves above.
Yeah. Oh, you're not like these people? Why not? They're, I mean, you can be a disruptor. You can say, listen, I'm going to innovate and turn this.
Yes.
I know you had Whitney Johnson on your show, and, you know, you can disrupt, but that doesn't come from a place of thinking you're superior. That comes from, I think I have a way to look at this that's going to change things. What else? I think that's about it. You don't want to challenge, and they don't take accountability, and there's a grandiosity. They really think there's an explosive grandiosity to their personality.
Right.
They can't, finally, there's no empathy. They cannot, and that's where it can really be like a monster.
Right.
Because they really can't look into your eyes and say, well, I don't agree with you, but I can feel what you're feeling. So really, so many of the people who come to me for coaching have had some kind of narcissism or emotional manipulation in their life or in their childhood. It comes through in the way you act.
That's really tough. That's really tough. And you found the hard way that by approaching that type of person, it just turned everything upside down for you. And then I assume it was soon after that you left. Is that what ended up happening?
Well, I was laid off with 100 people. But because it was 9/11 and
there was a lot
there were
going
reasons.
on. Yeah,
but
right.
I always felt from the minute I had that conversation with this individual, I was marked. That's the feeling I got.
Okay, got it. I love the other part of your story that I love is when you sat with your therapist and he said what he said was just amazing. But in life, do you think that oftentimes we get these aha moments? And one thing we must do is be brave to take action on those opportunities. I think of myself when I worked with Tony Robbins over 20 years ago. Right. And so I had that opportunity, but when he stood up in front of an audience and he was talking 5,000 people there in Chicago, I'm an employee. I'm sitting with my wife, who was pregnant at the time, who walked on coals. And she said, hey, nothing, walking on coals is nothing compared to childbirth, So go girl. So
I love it.
Yeah. So he stood up there and he said, talking about living your dream, he said, when would now be a good time? That hit me like a ton of bricks, right? Just like you in that therapy. Who do you want to be? This is your new choice now. What you've experienced in the path, Kathy, is really, in his perspective, I'm assuming, is just a hiccup. It doesn't have to define you, though. Right. You had that breakthrough, and then you took action from that. I know after Tony Robbins said that is when I left 2 weeks later. And I know with Howard Schultz of Starbucks Coffee Company, right? He had sort of an aha moment when he went to visit Italy and he noticed all the espresso bars and how the owners of those little cafes knew the customers' names and so forth. And then he decided when he came back that he was going to take those ideas and run with it, and the rest is history.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Anyway, I just think listening to those moments in our lives, I know we're going off track just a little bit.
I love
here. Listening to those thoughts and impressions and what people say that empower us and illuminate us. Hey, that's a moment to take action. Any thoughts around any of that?
I do have thoughts on that. I so love it. That's a breakthrough moment, right? Mm-hmm. But often human beings wait until there's a crisis to have the breakthrough, so it's the breakdown. My first book was Breakdown, Breakthrough. But I do want to say this. In researching this book and pulling the viewfinder back about what is missing in the lives of all these women in particular, but men I know have these too. Sure. What's missing? And also, what are they getting when they come to me as a coach? And the answer was two things. They're missing bravery to look honestly at what isn't working and take accountability. And I want to talk about that in a second.
Love it. Mm-hmm.
But the second thing that was missing is power. And, here's what I believe. We have to have internal access to power and external access to power. And what I hear from a lot of women in particular is, I don't want power. And I say, why not? And they say, because it's so abused today. I want to be confident. I want to be. And so part of my work is teaching that, Shakespeare said, nothing is but thinking makes it so. Power is not abusive. It's those who have wielded it in some way, have made it abusive. It's not a weapon unless you make it a weapon. But back to your point, when you're sitting there listening to Tony and you have an aha moment, I do think it's bravery to say, holy cow, it is time for me to make this change.
Yeah.
But to make that
It
change,
was a big leap. Yeah.
it's a leap, and you need power, and you need more confidence than we typically have in the breakdown experience.
Totally. So help me understand external resources versus internal resources. Here would be my research would lead me to believe that there's some things we can control and there's some things we can't control. Of the successful people that I've researched over many years now, I would say, depending on the external world to change before you change, you're going to be waiting a long time. The self from an internal place needs to change first. And when you start working on this, like I'm all about take accountability, take 100% responsibility, take ownership for your life. But that starts from the inside and works its way out. If you're waiting for the world to change before you change, you'll be waiting a long time.
I couldn't agree more. Can I
Yes.
highlight what you're saying with some examples?
Yes, please.
So that idea that we have to reach inside and become more powerful internally, I want to give an example of that.
Let's do it.
If I look at power gap number 1, it's not recognizing your special talents, abilities, and gifts. Again, not to, hit this too hard, but women really have a struggle with that. I happen to have a big following on LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. It's like the cocktail party in the sky to me.
Right.
But I can look at someone and in 5 minutes, DJ, I can see where they're hiding, where they don't understand how they're gifted and talented. So I 100% agree that we have to go internally and we have to understand, for instance, how we're amazing, because every person on this planet is amazing.
Right.
I talk about in my TED Talk, the 20 facts of you. Sit for a weekend with a white piece of paper or pad and write down what are those things that you have done that no one can take away from you, that are irrefutable, that you're so proud of, and own those, right? So there's that internal work that you must do first. And I do love to say this. If people come and they say, I hate my job, I want out tomorrow, I call it the pendulum effect. So many of us stay too long in an unhappy job and we go, like for me, I'm done with corporate, let me be a therapist. Opposite side of the world, right?
Right.
But for most of us, that isn't the right move. It's somewhere, it's a little more balanced, it's somewhere in between. What I say to people is, I want to help you become more powerful now in this job. Do this with me now. And when you are ready to leave, you're going to be energetically different. You are going to be able to attract different things because of now how you speak and how you think. And so that's the internal. The external piece, I think, is this. And you mentioned Power Gap 3, but Power Gap 4 is isolating from influential support. So one research study said that let's start with women, have 3 times as many mentors, but women have twice as many sponsors. And for people that want to understand that, to me, a mentor is someone who's in your sphere of influence where you have a support relationship. They're happy to give you guidance, advice. A sponsor is that, plus they're powerful. They're influential. They can open doors for you that you cannot open yourself. Okay. That's the access to external power. That's one aspect. What we see is a lot of people network in the same room with people at their level. Okay, that's lovely, but you also need people who are ambassadors for your work, who can open doors. I mean, I'm guessing you would agree with this. I don't think I would have any of the, what would you call it, influence, thought leadership, success. Even my Forbes blog, I wouldn't have without the help of other people.
100%. In fact, Stephen Covey, he was really known for standing. He's since passed away, but
I interviewed his son.
Did you?
In my Forbes blog?
Yes.
A month ago.
Sean, was it? Or was it the other son? Or is it
Stephen?
Stephen, right. Stephen MR.
Because they have the 30th anniversary of the 7 Habits out.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, no, that's great. So, and I interviewed Sean. So we're in this is great. But I remember he would stand up in front of executives
And he would say, by a show of hands, how many of you executives in this room can look back in time and know that it was because of someone else that gave you a lift, or someone gave you an opportunity that helps you get where you're at today? And he says in all of his years of asking that question, he does it more eloquently than I just did, but he says everybody would raise their hand. Nobody
except the narcissist.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. That's a good point, right? But
Wow.
but the point is, we don't get to the top or get to that next level on our own. We don't. It takes a team. It takes. But I would say what I love about you started off with the internal side, because you've got to work on yourself to create the credibility that those opportunities around you will open up, that when you do take advantage of that opportunity, that it's received, because you have, at some level, you've done enough of the personal development, you've shown that you can do the job, you've and so forth. But then, so you got to build the credibility aspect. Some people spend too much time building the credibility aspect before they ask a question. So there's a balance there, right? You can go overboard on any one of these.
Yes. Yes.
Which takes me, my mind is going to Power Gap 3.
Yeah.
Is once you've worked on yourself, once you have aligned yourself with mentors and people that can help you get to that next level, then Power Gap 3 is reluctance to ask for what you deserve and want. Could you talk about that for a second?
Yeah. So, again, I do think there's a difference here gender-wise, in that there was one study, for instance, that showed right out of MBA school, 57% of men negotiated their very first salary out of school. 7% of women.
Oh, you're kidding.
So women are trained, and there's, research in my book, and there's a lot of research about it, that at about age 13, women start to go underground. Before that, we're on par in confidence, in raising our hand for leadership, in thinking we can do STEM, science, technology, engineering, math, thinking we can be an astronaut. At about 13, girls start going underground.
Explain that. Just withholding?
Start questioning. They start withholding their voice and their ideas. They start to get much more concerned about body image than boys. They have much more social media pressure. They experience so much more, but really their voices go underground. And part of that is that even today, I have a 22-year-old and 25-year-old children. My daughter's 25. Even today, being raised by someone who's confident, and women are trained to be malleable, to be pleasing, to be, accommodating. So I have a theory about this that I learned in therapy. Okay. So, and, women have been shown kind of neurobiologically to read emotional cues better than men. So here's my theory. You're my boss, and I believe that I deserve a raise. For the most part, if I come to you, TJ, and say, could we have that conversation? I'd like to, and we set the time, and I bring up my case for getting a raise, what's your emotion probably going to be?
TJ speaking?
Boss who's sitting there in front of someone who wants more money.
Well, there might be a little bit of pushback from someone, but listen, if you're a hard worker and a high performer and you bring a good attitude to work, let's have that conversation.
Oh, I love it.
Because I want you to have
been my boss.
Because I want you to be valued, because I know if you're valued as a leader and you're entrusted by the leadership, it's going to be natural for you to want to even perform better and devote more to the company and want to give your heart and soul, figuratively speaking, to the company.
That's the way to think. And obviously, as they rise, you rise. Where I'm going with it is, a lot of people, a lot of bosses don't hear that conversation well.
Sure.
And women feel that. And so part of this being pleasing and accommodating is if we're going to ask for something that's hard to ask for, it's very difficult for us. And often women, for instance, don't even know if they deserve a raise. They're not even sure. They're not even sure how to build the case. The other thing that people struggle with, and I think men do too, asking for help. So a lot of us who've worked really hard, we don't want to appear vulnerable. We don't want to appear like we need help. So we are reluctant to ask for what we need and what we deserve. And if we don't overcome this gap, we are going to stay behind.
Totally.
We're not going to, and it's not even about competition. It's about fulfilling your highest potential.
Right. We're on the total same page. Now
we're on the same page completely.
You did talk to, in that chapter 3, you told a story about Janine. Great story. But at the end of that story, I thought I would just point these out because I think these are power. So on page 56, working with Janine, she had to let go of some specific things. And I'm going to read what she had to let go of, and maybe some things. I'll read a couple of the things, and you pause me if there's anything in here you want to add anything to.
Oh, I love it.
But this is what it says. Specifically, Janine, I had to let go of thinking I have to be perfect to be worthy. Just because of my consulting and my private executive coaching and so forth with all genders, I will say that is very prevalent. It seems like a lot of leaders and people that I coach are trying to prove their worthiness through either perfection or results. And I think that's a double-edged sword. So that was a let go of thinking, a negative way.
Can I add something to that, TJ? May I?
For sure.
I've coined the term perfectionistic overfunctioner. Trying to do more than is healthy, appropriate, and necessary, and trying to get an A+ in all of it.
Yeah.
So many people are incredibly valuable in their companies because they're perfectionistically overfunctioning, but it's going to break you down.
100%.
In other words, you don't do A+ in everything. Everything doesn't deserve A+. If you're trying to do that and please everyone, and you're working 24/7 remotely on Zoom, it's not sustainable, and you're doing it out of a sense of lack of worth. That's
very, very well said. Yes. The next one, I must put everyone else first to be a good girl. Success comes easily to others, not me. My audience knows this about me. I didn't read my first book until I was a junior in high school. And today, even as I sit here in front of you, Kathy, I'm not the fastest reader. I'm not the best reader. But you know what? That hasn't stopped me from writing books. It hasn't stopped me from reading hundreds and hundreds of books over the years and researching and so forth. So be careful of trying to stack up too high to others and what's expected and so forth.
Wow, that's inspirational.
The next one, I must continuously, she said, I must continuously improve my worth or prove my worth, and then people will see my worth through my hard work. Yeah, that's heavy stuff right there.
Can I say something about that one?
Oh, yeah.
I grew up with, and I know why, we won't go into it, but the idea that if it comes easily to you, it's not worth anything.
Oh, yeah.
So I had this idea that I have to slave for it to be something valuable.
Yeah.
And that is a crushing thing. What I want people to understand is I really believe, tell me what you think, but the happiest careers and the happiest people who are making an impact are leveraging who they are naturally. It doesn't mean they're not honing their skills, but why would you want to build a career with a skill that you don't like using?
100%. And you're not going to be as efficient either.
No, it's going to be a drag till the day you die or leave it. So leverage that stuff that comes easily, but you have to let go of this idea that if it's too easy, if it's easy, then maybe I'm not doing something right.
So for years, I've been saying the ease, and so when I wrote the book with Bob Mulwad called The Secret of the Slight Edge many years ago, he would always say, the easier it is to be good, the more difficult it is to be great.
Ooh.
The tendency, and it goes right in harmony with what you said, the tendency is when things come easy to us, we tend to coast. The problem with coasting is that it implies that we're heading downhill, because you only coast downhill.
You know what I hear when you say that? You know, when I look at the 18-year corporate career, I didn't really love any of it. Yeah. Why? Because I think I was a therapist in nature, even when I was 16. But what I love about what you're saying is, I call that mastery. It's one thing to just coast with a skill, but for me, it was very important to master aspects of helping people. And so, yeah, we can coast and go, I'm kind of good at these conversations. But I think what you're talking about with your son is, let's be masterful in developing it to the highest level you physically, emotionally, spiritually can. Does that sound right?
Yep, totally sounds right. So nice. That's great, Kathy. All right. So what this lady, Janine, had to change were a couple, I'll just read a few of them here. People aren't mind readers. I have to speak up for what I want. Hey, in my early marriage years, sometimes Danielle would expect me to know something, and so finally I got to the point.
That's her mistake.
Well, I know, and I taught her. I said,
teasing.
I get it. But I think more people do it than we realize. I would tell her, honey, I'm not a mind reader. If you want something, you've used this word several times in the book, assertive. You've got to be assertive.
Right.
And tell me exactly, and I'll align with it. But if I don't know, I'm not gonna know. And I think that's part of the point.
I love it. And part of that is branding. A lot of people say, women say, I don't want to do this. I don't want to build my brand. Why do I have to talk about what I'm great at? Because you do. I don't mean in a braggarty, hideous way.
That's
I
right.
mean, if you can't let it flow out of your mouth, what your gifts are and what you're passionate about and the outcomes you love to serve,
that's right.
Who's going to do it? But a lot of people don't want to be assertive because, let's face it, it's a little uncomfortable when you're not used to it. When you're not used to it.
For sure.
But then it gets more comfortable.
It does. Do the thing. Mark Twain, what did he say? Do the thing you fear and the fear will dissipate. Right. So you do have to step into the unknown, what's uncomfortable and so forth. Now, talking about, I feel like as I was going through your book and so forth, many of these principles, yes, very strongly apply to women. And you have a lot of research in here on the women angle of it. And it's kind of humbling to see how the game is played a little bit. It's a little bit out of balance, I think. So I think you point some of that stuff out.
I appreciate you saying that.
But I think it also applies, many of these principles apply to men as well. Now, I think all this leads to, what did you say here? I took some notes.
Thank you for pouring over it.
Yeah, no, I did. Oh man, you wouldn't believe how many papers I have here. Oh,
wow.
Man. Yeah. Listen, I put applies to men too under one section. You talk about underground. We already talked about that. Power to me, you say, is the ability to act on one's own belief, to advocate for ourselves and others in an effective way, becoming the true author of our lives and strengthening ourselves and our ability to see ourselves powerfully and to bravely speak, ask, connect, challenge, and serve and heal with confidence, strength, and positive impact. That's a long sentence, but a true sentence. I was doing, what do you think about this? I am currently, so I got to be a little vague here, but I'm coaching an executive, a woman who's done well, but with this COVID-19, she's had to work because the company has sent X amount percentage of people home to work. She's been at home working and she has 3 children. Yeah. And someone like her she is discovering, because she's been a career woman her whole life, that all this time she really wants to just be, and I don't mean just as weakening it, but she just wants to be a mom.
Oh, wow.
And I think that too, Kathy, is a noble desire. Do you agree with that? I mean,
of course I do. Yeah. I mean, to me, whatever your authentic desires are, I don't like that our society flip-flops, when I remember moving where I lived in Connecticut before Wilton, a lawyer was walking her dog and she said, "Are you Kathy? You just moved in?" Yeah. She said, she ran up and hugged me and said, "You work. Nobody on this street works."
Oh.
And I remember thinking, so this is 20 years ago. I thought, wow. So, she was saying, I feel so isolated because a lot of women here not only stay home, they don't work.
Yeah, right.
But I feel like the last thing we need is that we've flipped and that we're not honoring and supporting women who choose to stay home. And I feel that's the same with men. My husband, who we're not together now, but we're very amicable and loving, he is a famous jazz percussionist, but he was able to be home with the kids while I was working. He would bring my kids to play dates and women would look at him like, what is this?
Yeah, totally.
This is not what we're looking for, people. We're looking for authentic choices, wholeness. That if men want to be home, they can be home watching the kids. If women want to do it, why are we such a judgmental society that it's right, wrong? Where'd that come? So I'm with you, but
I agree
for
with
her,
you.
I feel for her because that's a stunning realization that's going to shift her own identity.
Yeah, for sure.
And when we have to let go of an identity that we've spent a long time crafting, it can be difficult. It can be painful. It can be scary.
It can. So I would
Glad
say
she's working with you.
Yeah, for real. The higher the vision, though, the higher the sense of purpose, the higher, and being able to put a plan together that's that once she takes that step, she can thrive. She'll be fine, right?
Can I say this too? It's all about timing.
A lot of it is.
For instance, I was a corporate VP when the kids were little. Then I was studying marriage and family therapy, and I was in the fabric of their life, which I'm so glad for. But now they're grown, and I could not do what I'm doing now back then.
Yeah, got it. Yeah.
So I think if we can think of our lives as fluid, that right now, what I want to be is home with my children.
Got it.
Then I think it makes the whole journey a little easier than I have to make this decision for the rest of my life, because
that's good.
In 20 years, you won't be who you are now anyway. So don't bother with the rest of your life.
Love
think
that.
about
That's
now.
good balance. That's really good balance, Kathy, that there are seasons in life. So if you make a choice that makes you more whole right now, and it's good and worthy and within your desires, and it's authentically you, hey, make that decision, go do it. But it doesn't mean you have to live forever in that place.
Right.
We can adjust, we can change. Oh,
that's it.
That's having control. That's having those choices are what it means to have control over your life.
That's right.
So that's really cool.
And not feel trapped.
And not feel, listen, I know we could go on and on and on, but one thing I would love to do before we close out is let's quickly bullet point. Let's go over the 7 power gaps. Could we do that real quick?
I would love that.
So number 1 is power, and you jump in here at any point.
You got it.
Power gap number 1 is not recognizing your special talents, abilities, and accomplishments. Any thoughts on that? Bullet point thoughts.
I just want to say, if this is helpful, and maybe we link to it below, there's a certain thing that people say over and over when they have these gaps. This one is, I have no idea how I'm special, talented, and unique. And I don't even think I have any special talents. That's what people say.
Huge, huge. Power gap number 2, communicating from fear, not strength. I'll just add something here. Early on in my career as a salesperson and so forth, it's really critical to have, let's say, influence when you're working with someone in a sales call, for example,
Right.
to not show desperation.
Right.
And so there's a balance there, because sometimes as a salesperson, especially if you're working commission, right, you're feeling some desperation. I've got to make this sale. I'm on the 18th day of the month and I haven't made a sale yet. I've got to make this sale. There's some desperation, but be careful that you don't communicate that fear to other people. Now, what's your take on that particular?
Well, I totally understand what you mean. I think, however, I believe that everything is energy. So if you're feeling fear, fear is going to ooze out.
Yes.
So what I would suggest, because, I have a therapeutic lens, let's go back. Let's look at the root of it. Let's look at how you might be able to behave in a way that you don't experience that, or you do a push up earlier in the month where at the end of the month, you're not feeling hysterical, because really, if you feel it, it's going to come out.
Got it.
That's what I would say.
Okay. Got it. Yeah. So let's deal with it.
Let's deal with it in a way
especially if it keeps coming up over and over and over.
Because when we're afraid, we're not really listening to the person. We're not. Sales is about what can I do for you to enhance whatever your goal is, right?
Right.
If I'm too freaked out, I can't even hear you. I can't even connect.
That's a good point. All right. Power gap number 3, reluctance to ask for what you deserve. We talked about that.
We did that.
So
That's
fine. And then you even talked about power gap number 4, isolating from influential supports. We'll skip that one. Power gap number 5, acquisition instead of saying stop to mistreatment. You did touch on that earlier. I think that
one thing I want to say is, men and women, I give a lot of talks to big audiences, and I say, how many of you have witnessed something in front of you, either to yourself or to someone else, that you went home at night and said, oh my, I don't know what to do about this, but this is wrong. Yeah. And every single hand shoots up. So this is acquiescing, letting it go instead of saying stop. And I mean, we can apply the racial lens to it, gender lens, anybody who's been mistreated.
Love that.
And I think probably all of us have in some way, but some to a much greater degree. It's time that we don't let it slide and grin and bear it. We must stand up now. And in the book, I outline ways to do it that mitigate it can be dangerous to speak up. You can get fired. You can get sidelined. You can get blackballed or blacklisted.
Yeah, I'm with you.
So there are ways to do it. So the book talks about how do we say no to mistreatment.
I think those principles in that chapter will be really powerful for people, because we also live in a kind of a woke cancel culture that you say the wrong thing, you can also get blacklisted. So learning how to say things in such a way that probably at some level is somewhat agreeable and understanding. Anyway.
Yeah.
Power gap 6, losing sight of your thrilling dream for your life. Love that.
This is the one that 76% of the almost 1,000 women that I have surveyed. So 98% of the women I surveyed are having at least one of these gaps. Over 75% are having 3 or more.
Okay.
76% are having this, and 25% say of all the gaps, this is the one that resonates most. Briefly, it's, I had a dream for what I was going to do here. Out of college, I thought I was going to do something. And where the heck is it? Totally. Who am I? How did this happen? Totally. And when people wake up to that, it's crushing. Especially when you hit 40, what happens is you potentially think there are fewer years ahead of you than potentially behind you.
But that's a false belief right there.
That is a false belief, but I do think the time becomes more urgent.
100%. I agree with that. The time is valuable, right?
Right.
But I have thousands of stories of people who were over 40 years old who made a 180 change in their lives and went after their dream they had always dreamt about, or went a new path and figured out something that was making them more whole. Later, I mean, here's one person that comes to mind, Susan Jeffers, who wrote Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway.
Yeah.
She had a difficult early adult life. And then after she went and got her therapist degrees and so forth, and psychology degrees and so forth. And it was into her 40s that she wrote that book that became a mega international bestseller. So all I'm saying is George Eliot once said, which, by the way, people don't know this, George Eliot was not a male.
Yeah.
George Eliot was a woman under a male name, right?
Amazing.
Back in the day. And she said, it's never too late to be what you might have been. So just keep dreaming.
Where I was going with that was when you hit 40, instead of struggling so hard and for what you don't care about, you realize, wait a minute, I don't want to waste a minute more. So I was 41 when I became a therapist. The point there is don't wait.
Yeah.
And you can make a change really at any age, but you won't need to do it wisely. Don't chuck your big career and become a singer in the band without knowing how to fund a transition. There's a wise way to do it, and there's a
Agreed.
not so wise.
That's your balance, Kathy, of between optimism and assessing risk or analyzing pitfalls, right? There's got to be a balance there. If you're, let's say on a scale from 1 to 10, an optimist, and you're only a 2, let's say on analyzing pitfalls, there's going to be a problem.
You're right.
But there's also going to be a problem if you're a 10 on analyzing pitfalls and only a 2 on optimism.
You're right.
Where's the sweet spot? Let's be a 7 on both of those, or an 8 on both of those, or a 10 on both of those.
I like that.
Anyway,
I love it.
There's a balance, right?
Balance. Love it.
Okay. And then where are we at? Power gap number 7.
Mm.
Allowing past trauma and challenges to define you. Let's end with this one. What are some thoughts?
Oh, good. So as a former therapist, I use the word trauma more easily than other people. But the thing is, no human being has gone through life without something traumatic. Whether it's you got fired, you had a narcissistic boss who stole your idea, you were laid off and told you're stupid.
Yep.
These things are traumatic and they get into your energy system. And in the book, I share a story about my friend Cheryl Hunter, who it's a riveting and agonizing story of something brutal that she went through and how she turned it around. What you do have to understand, so this power gap is I've been devastated by what's happened. And it can be as seemingly small as being laid off.
Yeah.
Like I literally was devastated for 2 years until I woke up and said, I hated that job. Why am I still stuck feeling devastated about it? So what I'm asking here is that we look at that dirty little secret or that thing that gives us shame and humiliation, and we heal it once and for all, and understand that everything that's happened to you can be for your highest good, but you have to heal. That's what that means.
Love that. That's very meaningful and rich. Kathy, that's great. All right. So tell us, I listen, I have so many papers here with many more questions and so forth, but our time is about up. And I think, wow, you have some powerful power gaps here and strategies for increasing your braveness. Is that a word? Can you say braveness?
Sounds good to me. Bravery, I guess, would be the noun.
There we go. Increase. Thank you. Wow, you're so smooth. Bravery. You increase your bravery. And by the way, you have a podcast where people can listen. What's the podcast called?
Finding Brave.
Finding Brave. Okay.
And I call it that because we find it. It doesn't just snap in. And it's not just a one-time thing. You got to find it every day, every conversation. Finding Brave.
Got it. That's awesome. All right. Now, how can people get your book? Where's the best place to go and so forth?
The best place would be at kathycaprino.com/most powerful you book.
Okay, we'll put that.
That's where it is. You can see a little trailer, and you can find me at kathycaprino.com or findingbrave.org. It's all there. But I do hope folks will find this motivating, inspiring, that we can grab the reins of our career, which helps us grab the reins on our life. Let's face it. You can't separate them, right?
Totally.
I hope people will find it helpful. Thank you so much for a great conversation and for reading it and poring over it with your notes.
Oh, yeah.
I appreciate it so much.
I always try to do that. But listen, you were great to have on the show. I think your concepts are real, and really for the reader, the listener that's hearing this right now, take the concepts and really internalize them and begin making those bold choices and changes that can elevate your life. Kathy, thank you for being on the Unleash Your Greatness Within podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
You betcha.
Bye, everybody.